The hijacker thought he'd picked the perfect target. City bus, morning rush hour, docile driver who looked like he wouldn't hurt a fly. He had no idea that the man behind the wheel had once been the most feared sniper in Southeast Asia, or that some instincts never fade. Welcome to Hidden Heroes Chronicles. Before we begin this powerful story of courage, sacrifice, and forgotten heroism, tell me in the comments from which city and at what age you're watching this video today. And if you believe real warriors never forget their own, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter. Robert Chen had been driving Route 47 for 12 years. Same routine every morning. 6:45 first stop, 8:30 downtown terminal. He was known as the quiet driver who never complained, never talked politics, never shared stories. Passengers knew him but didn't really know him. The gentle man who helped elderly passengers with their bags, who waited an extra minute for running commuters. But that's all they saw. In Robert's small house there was a dusty box in the closet. Inside were medals, photographs, and letters that were never opened. Letters from Vietnam. From the years 1968 to 1971. That morning started like every other morning. At 6:45 he took his bus, started the engine, began Route 47. At the first stop Janet Miller got on, sitting in the front seat as always. At the second stop construction workers, at the third high school students. At Maple Street stop, everything changed. Robert knew something was wrong with the man at first glance. He wasn't an ordinary passenger. He was sweating, his eyes were constantly moving, his backpack hung strangely on one shoulder. Downtown, the man said. There was tension in his voice. Robert nodded and closed the doors. But he continued watching the man through the rearview mirror. Habits he'd learned 30 years ago had never left. The man sat in the middle of the bus, took his bag on his lap. Other passengers were reading their newspapers, busy with their phones. No one was paying attention. But Robert saw everything. How the man was sweating, how his hands were shaking, how he kept touching the zipper of his bag. As they approached the fifth stop, a pregnant woman got on. Sarah Martinez, the midwife who rode to work every morning. 7 months pregnant, always smiling. When the man saw her, something changed. His eyes focused. He moved his hand to his bag. Robert's heart began to race. At 7:23, just as they passed Elm Street, the man stood up. "Stop the bus," he shouted. Robert was watching the man in the mirror. He had pulled something metallic from his bag. "Do what I say. Stop right now." Passengers were now beginning to pay attention. Janet Miller turned around. Construction workers stood up. The man pulled out his gun. An old model revolver, but real. "Nobody move," he shouted. "Driver, stop the bus." Sarah Martinez screamed in fear. She wrapped her arms around her pregnant belly as if protecting it. "Leave her alone," Robert said quietly. "What did you say?" Robert began to slow the bus. But his eyes were on the man. The reflexes from 30 years ago were beginning to awaken. "Leave the pregnant woman alone. Your fight isn't with her. You can't give me orders." The man pointed the gun at Sarah. At that moment Robert Chen was no longer the quiet bus driver. At that moment he was Sergeant Chen again. The quietest killer of the Mekong Delta. Robert stopped the bus completely. Turned off the engine. Slowly stood up. "My name is Robert Chen," he said in a calm voice. "I'm a Vietnam veteran. I served from 1968 to 1971. I don't care." The man stammered. "You're scared," Robert continued. "You're sweating, you're shaking hands, your eyes constantly moving. You have PTSD." The man hesitated. "How do you know?" "Because I have it too. I've had the same nightmares every night for 30 years. But I don't hurt innocent people." Robert slowly began walking down the bus aisle. Each step was calculated. "Were you a soldier too?" Robert asked. "Iraq. 2003, IED exploded, my friends died. I survived." "Survivor's guilt," Robert said. "Yes, I know. I blamed myself for surviving for years too." The man pointed the gun at Robert. "Stop. Don't come closer." But Robert knew he couldn't be stopped now. "Put down your gun, son," Robert said. "These passengers aren't your enemy." "This world abandoned me," the man shouted. "No job, no home, nobody cares." "I care," Robert said. "Everyone on this bus cares. But this isn't the way." The man hesitated. Robert was waiting for this moment. With a move he'd learned 30 years ago, Robert took control of the gun in the man's hand. In one motion he disarmed him, brought him to the ground, and threw the gun to a safe distance. It took 6 seconds. The passengers were shocked. The gentle, quiet bus driver had executed a professional tactic with lightning speed. The man on the ground began to cry. Kill me? I've ruined everything anyway. Robert sat beside him. No, son. You haven't ruined anything. You're sick. But you can be treated. When the police arrived, they found an unexpected scene. The man was handcuffed but calm. Robert continued talking with him. How did this happen? Police Chief Williams asked Robert. I'm a veteran. So is he. Sometimes old soldiers understand each other. But one of the passengers, Janet Miller, whispered something in the police officer's ear. She had done her own research. Chief, Janet said. Do you know who this man is? The police chief looked at Robert. A bus driver. No, Janet said. This is Robert Chen, Vietnam sniper. 1968 to 1971. Military Cross recipient. 47 confirmed kills. There was silence. Robert shrugged. That stayed in the past. But today you used those skills, the chief said. Today I used them to protect people, Robert said. In the past I used them for different reasons. That evening local news covered the story extensively. Bus driver prevents hijacking was the headline. But the real story was different. Robert Chen was the story of a soldier who had become a legend in the Vietnam War. At only 19 years old, he had undertaken impossible missions in the Mekong Delta. Sergeant Chen, as Robert was nicknamed, had conducted solo operations behind enemy lines. Never captured, never wounded, never failed. When the war ended, he returned home. Never talked, never boasted, never told his stories. Just tried to live a normal life. Those people think I'm a hero, he had told his friend. But I just did my job. The real heroes are the ones who couldn't come home. The man, Michael Torres, received psychiatric treatment, PTSD therapy and job placement program. 6 months later he started working at a construction company. Robert continued his same routine every morning. But now passengers looked at him differently. Sarah Martinez constantly thanked him. Construction workers started talking to him. Janet Miller went to the Veterans Affairs office and applied for Robert to receive benefits. This man has been ignored for 30 years, she said. Now it's time. A month later, Robert received an invitation from City Hall. They were going to hold an honor ceremony. You don't have to go, the mayor said. But the city wants to pay its debt of gratitude to you. Robert thought for a long time. Then he accepted. On the ceremony day, City Hall was packed. They hadn't come just for Robert. They had come for all ignored veterans. When Robert stepped up to the podium, veterans in the hall stood up. From different wars, different ages. But all showing the same respect. I'm not a hero, Robert said. I'm just someone who did his job. The real heroes. His voice broke. The real heroes are the ones who couldn't come home. Michael Torres was also at the ceremony. Treatment had worked. He was now clean, sober, and had a stable job. Mr. Chen could have killed me that day, Michael said. But instead he saved me. That's why I'm here. A year later Robert Chen was still driving Route 47. But he was no longer just a bus driver. He had also started working part-time as a veteran counselor. 2 days a week, he helped veterans receiving PTSD treatment. He shared his own experiences, taught them coping mechanisms. War never ends, he would say in group therapy. But we can learn to live in peace. The passengers on his bus now looked at him with different eyes. They saw him not just as a driver but as a mentor, a protector, a reminder. After Sarah Martinez gave birth, she named the baby Robert. For saving our lives, she said. The box in Robert's house was now open. Vietnam photographs, medals and letters were displayed in a display case. There was nothing left to hide. He went to the local high school as a guest speaker. Students asked him about the Vietnam War. War is a terrible thing, he told the students. But sometimes you have to do terrible things for good reasons. What matters is what you do when you come home. A student asked, what is PTSD like? Robert thought for a long time. It's like the past constantly coming back. But over time, you learn to use that past for the beautiful things of today. Do you regret going to war? Not for going, Robert said. But I regret not telling anyone about it for so long. Because my story could have helped other veterans. Robert Chen is no longer the quiet driver. But he still drives the same route, serves the same people. The difference, he no longer hides who he is. What happened on the bus that day wasn't just a hijacking. It was the breaking of 30 years of silence. It was a veteran finding himself again. And most importantly, it was a community beginning to see its forgotten heroes again. Michael Torres now helps other veterans. He passes on the compassion Robert showed him to others. When someone gives you hope, he says, you must give hope to others. There's now a small plaque on Robert's bus. It reads, Route 47 driven by hero. Robert objected but the passengers insisted. I'm not a hero, he still says. I'm just doing my job. But isn't that the definition of true heroism? Protecting people, helping them, giving hope. And doing it without boasting, quietly, every day. Now I ask you, have you ever met someone like Robert Chen? Someone who served quietly for years, never told their story but changed lives anyway? Write their names in the comments. Tell us how they lived. Say the things they would never say because they deserve to be remembered. And if this story touched you, subscribe to Hidden Heroes Chronicles. We're here to make sure people like Robert are never invisible again. Their silence was earned. Now it's time we speak for them. We'll see you in the next story. And until then, if you see someone standing quietly on a bus, in a store or restaurant, don't ask them what they did. Just say thank you. Because they probably did much more.